Welcome, friends of the library, to day 6 of Cranberry Library Classes. Today I'd like to share with you some jokes from the book called Mix and Match Jokes, where you take two things and put them together to create something new. For example, what do you get when you cross a pine tree with a pig? A porcupine. What do you get when you cross a chimpanzee and a tool? A monkey wrench. What do you get when you cross a teddy bear with a ghost? Winnie the Pooh. And last but not least, what do you get when you cross a storm with a deer? A reindeer. And here's a picture. Today's story is called Snapsy the Alligator. The words are by Julie Falacco, and the pictures are by Tim Miller. Snapsy the Alligator did not ask to be in this book. Snapsy the Alligator wasn't feeling like himself. His feet felt draggy. His skin felt baggy. His tail wouldn't swish this way and that. And worst of all, his big jaw wouldn't snap. This is terrible! I'm just hungry. Why is this rude narrator trying to make it seem like I need a nap? So Snapsy went off in a search of food. He walked along the edge of the pond. He scooted up the tall, tall hill. He shimmied through the forest. You're an awful narrator. You're just describing what you see in the illustrations. Snapsy, the big, mean alligator, kept looking for food. He liked to eat tiny, defenseless birds and soft, fuzzy bunnies. He prowled through the forest looking for victims when he came to it's just a store, a grocery store. It's where I buy my food. Snapsy looked hungrily at the other shoppers, while loading his shopping cart with pudding, peanut butter, pita bread, and popcorn. Yes, Snapsy the Alligator was particularly fond of a certain letter of the alphabet. I don't only eat food that starts with the letter P. You don't have to make it seem like I only buy storybook food. I'm also buying cheddar, apples, pretzels, pasta, pears. It's just a coincidence. Snappy, the big, mean, hungry alligator, who only liked food that started with the letter P, carried his groceries back through the forest, back down the hill, back around a pond, until he got to a surprisingly lopsided shack. Oh, you are really cheesing me off. It's my house and I built it myself. No narrators allowed. I'll say. Snappy the Alligator took his groceries into his splinter-laden shed and slammed the door quite hard. He was inside. Still inside. What was he doing in there? Was he making crafty plans? Was he roasting innocent forest creatures that he already had sorted and stored in his freezer? Had he fallen asleep? I made a peanut butter sandwich and now I'm reading a book. Well, you have to come out. The story is really boring now. If you must know, I'm planning a party. Snapsy the Alligator was trying to better his reputation with the other animals and decided to throw a party. Snappy vacuumed the rug. He made goodie bags for all the guests. Wait, those aren't goodie bags. He's just taking out the garbage. Snapsy should really put out goodie bags for his guests. They love those. You know what? I did not ask to be in this book. I was just having a normal day, and suddenly you were talking about what I was doing. So I'm throwing a party to make things more interesting. I hope you're happy. Now, I just want you to buzz off. Thank you. Oh, go ahead. I can hear you breathing. Snapsy's party was shaping up to be quite a festive event. Colorful streamers hung from the ceiling. There were cubes of cheese and a bowl of punch. Some kind of danceable music was playing. Then Snapsy's friends started to arrive. They were laughing and dancing. They weren't hungry or thirsty. They looked like they were having a really good time. Yes, a fine time indeed. Oh, all right, you can come in. Oh, gosh me, the humble narrator. Well, I don't know. Let me check my calendar. I suppose I could come for an hour or two. Someone has to demonstrate proper dance steps. All the important guests had finally arrived, and while Snapsy's sharp teeth were still glinting menacingly, he was actually a lovely host. Does anyone want pudding? Aha! Because pudding is really good. And we all ate pudding and did the chicken dance. We were really looking forward to Snapsy throwing parties like this every week. Hey! I think Snapsy thinks a party a week might be a little much. Now, our main character of our story was Snapsy. So, I went online and Tim Miller, the illustrator of the book, has a website on Kidlit, which I put in the handout as a link if you'd like to go there. And it gives you the directions how to draw a Snapsy. And he demonstrates his techniques for drawing for kids. So if you are interested, the link is in the handout that went out on Monday for day 6. Let's get back to our characters from Master of a Disaster, who are Henry, Reed, and Riley. And today we look at Chapter 7, The Last Great Race, Memorial Day Parade Disaster. The Dog Sled Plan. Final report and summary respectfully submitted by Riley Donnelly. The Dog Sled Plan was launched at precisely 0900 hours 43 minutes on Saturday morning, 47 hours and 17 minutes prior to the Memorial Day Parade, when Henry Mosley began to figure out that the parade entry he and his friends Reed and Riley, author of this report, would submit this year. Mosley's inspiration was a pack of 7 dogs, a Rottweiler, a Golden Lab, 2 Irish Setters, a Border Collie, a wire-haired Terrier mix, and a Chihuahua, the current client list of Hamner's fledgling dog-walking business. The dogs were tangled together and squirming, and Hamner was patiently trying to untangle their leashes from each other when Mosley first conceived his parade idea. Mosley suggested eliminating the Iditarod, the dog sled race across Alaska, despite the facts that there hasn't been sufficient snow for a dog sled race in May in Ohio since the Ice Age, and that access to that kind of dog sleds that traditionally run the race were sorely lacking. The willingness of the Chihuahua, Kelly and Patty the Irish Setters, Genevieve the Border Collie, Wiley the Mixed Terrier, Carl the Rottweiler, and Annie the Golden Lab was taken as a given in the midst of this enthusiastic adoption of the dog sled concept. Without securing the full support of his peers, they devised a mock sled made of plywood, harnesses made of nylon webbing sewn together, and a gang line and tugs made out of rope that would make a hook to the front of the sled. Having once read a book about dog sledding, Mosley had insisted that clamping 4 skateboards underneath the mock sled would compensate for the lack of snow, but that complete control of the contraption would remain with the boys due to the addition of an old piece of carpet as a makeshift brake. It was fastened to the back of the sled with a stout line. Despite everyone's reluctance to utilize the dogs, Mosley prevailed by liking the parade to the daily walks on which Hamner was paid to take the dogs, and suggesting that replacing the leashes with tug ropes tied to a gang line and riding in the sled instead of walking with the dogs would provide minimal disruption of the dogs' schedules and create absolutely no possibility for disaster. Hamner and Dolan lacked the will to say no because, 1, Hamner knew that Erica Peterson had synchronized skate team would be selling lemonade at the parade, and two, yours truly had a desire to see how everything would turn out. The plan was reluctantly put into action. The morning of Memorial Day was spectacular. The sun was shining, the sky was filled with puffy clouds, and there was absolutely no evidence that later in the day a mixed herd of llamas, ponies, and dogs would stampede through the front of the ice cream store, funnel out the back covered with Rocky Road ice cream and peach fat-free yogurt, swing around to the left and run amok in the back alley before being rounded up by the mounted police force. Initially, the plan unfolded smoothly, with the singular exception of the small tangle that forced Hamner to run alongside the dogs as they pulled the sled from his house down to the starting area, because the house pets didn't know what a lead dog was. Well, the Chihuahua knew, but no other dog wanted to follow the Chihuahua, especially when they were 4 times faster and 14 times bigger. At that point, Mosley was still insisting that the whole thing is going to go like clockwork. The parade stepped off from the community center at precisely 100 hours, led by veterans, the parade marshal, and the mayor, all of whom were riding in the convertibles. Following the dignitaries were many papier-mâché decorated floats representing various community organizations. The fire and police departments flashed lights and blasted sirens from their respective trucks and cars. The high school football team led the marching band and cheerleading squad from the school. A quilting club, a cooking class, and a book club shared space on an antique steam engine. A group of 5 llamas and 10 riderless ponies from the local petting zoo followed closely behind a small theatrical group from the after-school center's production of Grease. The dog sled, assorted tractors, and collectible muscle cars and a motorcycle stunt team brought up the rear of what everyone later agreed could have been the best Memorial Day parade suburban Cleveland had ever seen. At this juncture, it's important to mention that for years, the area at the center of the suburb had been the stomping ground of a domestic cat gone wild. Scared from many battles, but partially hairless from countless scrapes, and generally confused as a result of his advanced age, Gordon had used at least 6 of his 9 lives and currently lived under the dumpster next to the ice cream store. Despite being feral and half-mad, Gordon was surprisingly social and enjoyed a good parade as much as anyone else in the town. Mosley was at the rear of the sled and Hamner was trotting along in front, confidently leading his dog team through the streets, waving at his relatives and friends and searching for signs of Erica Peterson and her synchronized skate team along the parade route as they approached the spot from which Gordon had chosen to watch the parade, 174 feet from the entrance of the ice cream store. When the dogs jogged past they were immediately behind the ponies, which were behind the llamas, which followed the assortment of theater students dressed up in poodle skirts and leather jackets, singing an a cappella version of We Go Together, with what this reporter can only call an excessive amount of shoebox. The cat was quietly watching the parade. The dogs were enjoying being in the parade. Dwight Hauser, however, who had never enjoyed anything in his entire miserable, misbegotten life, had to go and ruin everything. This reporter, who was jogging alongside the dog sled, taking notes and snapping the occasional photo, along with running the video camera, spotted Hauser, who spotted the dogs, as they spotted the cat. Even so, nothing would have happened had Hauser's tiny mind not conceived an evil, vicious, malicious plan. Hauser leaned over as the dogs trotted by and said, "Meow," right into the ear of the Chihuahua. The Chihuahua, obeying his genetic code that makes even frail, tiny, particularly decrepit dogs think and act as if they were a direct link to prehistoric pack-hunting wolves, leapt out of his ill-fitting harness. The standard-sized harnesses afforded a great deal of wiggle room for this Chihuahua, and once freed, he tore after the cat. The Chihuahua's explosive surge of speed and his bloodthirsty snarling and yipping triggered the Rottweiler's bloodlust, and Carl was a dog who couldn't resist a chase. His full-power lunge jerked the rest of the team ahead, yanking Hamner off his feet and dragging him after the sled by the rope tied to his waist. As the sled jumped first, the rugged brake was jerked from beneath Mosley's feet, and he fell onto the sled on his face, his feet kicking in the air. Perched on top of 4 sets of free roller skateboard wheels and encumbered by Hamner acting as lead dog, or Mosley expertly exerting pressure on the rug brake, the dogs shrieked through the middle of the parade like a jet-powered train. The team and the sled plowed directly into the pack of llamas, which got tangled up with a herd of ponies, which tripped the grade school singers, all of who became entwined in the dogs' gangline. The entire spitting, braying, barking, screaming, singing mass headed for Gordon. While he was normally willing to enter into battle with all preconceived threats, Gordon knew he was outnumbered, and adopting discretion as the better part of valor, he ducked down and headed for the nearest escape route, which at that moment proved to be the open door of the ice cream store, from which the Reverend Potter Jenkins was emerging with his annual Memorial Day treat, French vanilla covered with sprinkles on a handmade waffle cone. So involved was the Reverend Jenks with managing the dripping cone that he did not see the large cat followed by the llamas, the ponies, the dogs, the singers, and a makeshift dog sled with one boy upside down and another being dragged along by a rope tied around his waist. The cone halfway to his mouth was slammed into his face, blinding him as he pawed, barking, screaming, spitting, singing, as the hooved, pawed, barking, screaming, spitting, singing tsunami roared over him and into the store. Witnesses, including this reporter, saw Gordon make 2 quick loops of the shop, pursued by the mob, before he blew a hole through the exact center of the screen door leading to the back alley. He was followed immediately by llamas, ponies, dogs, rowdy theater students still singing, the sled, Mosley, and Hamner, who later denied that they had screamed the whole time, even though Lacey, the girl who worked at the ice cream store, testifies she clearly heard Hammer beller, "Call 911!" as she stood paralyzed, a cup of mango strawberry gelato melting in her hand. The torn screen frayed the rope that attached Hamner to the dog team, but his momentum was such that once freed, he flew straight towards the porta-potty that the town fathers had placed in the alley for the parade crowd. In the back alley, Gordon streaked up a power pole, where he clung to the top by his claws, shaking. The rest of the animals, joyous but exhausted, milled around the alley underneath the pole, making it easier for the policeman's mounted unit to round up the still spitting llamas, ice cream-covered ponies, and howling dogs, while simultaneously freeing the musical actors from the melee. Local law enforcement, in this observer's opinion, did a magnificent job and delivered each animal and miner back to its proper supervisor, a little the worse for wear to be sure, but in a surprisingly upbeat mood. In the end, 2 boys rested upended in the deserted alley. "Is it over?" Hamner called from underneath the tipped-over porta-potty. "I think I'm okay, even though my head seems to have been propelled through a wall of this outside bathroom thingy, and I'm looking at the business end of the toilet seat, which makes it a little hard to breathe. And I don't mean to worry or complain, but I think I got road rash when I was pulled along the ground after the dog team. Because there's a kind of burning and stinging and itching with isolated patches of numbness along the right side of my body." "It was," Mosley said dreamily. "Awesome." The noise was overpowering, and the rhythm of so many different animals and small children was amazing. I sure hope Riley got this on video so we can watch it later. And is it just me, or do you think the community access cable channel would leap at the chance to air that footage? "It'd be nice to be on TV," Hamner agreed. "A replay would fill in the gaps of what I have missed when I was upside down and skidding after the dog team on my face." Mosley went on. "It's like I said the last time, we're really getting good at this adventure stuff. And now the world, or at least the world that subscribes to our local community access cable channel, will see how enterprising and take charge we are." He climbed out of the sled and pried the porta-potty door off Hamner's head. "I'm glad we decided we needed to shake things up. Best decision we ever made." The videotape of the parade is submitted here with a visual proof that the contents of this report are true and accurate to the best of this reporter's abilities. Sincerely yours, Riley Dolan. Chapter 8, Propaganda and Turtle Dregs. "It's the last day of school, men," Henry announced as he and Reed limped to the cafeteria for lunch. It was the day after the Memorial Day parade. Riley followed, not limping. "We need to make it special, and there's a wrong I've seen that we need to right. I have an idea." "I don't know that I'm up for another plan so soon after that last one, Henry," Reed said. "Although being dragged along the parade route through the ice cream store and out into the alley on my side by a dog team, a herd of ponies, and a flock of llamas, and several dozen musically inclined students seemed to lessen the constant smell of baby Drudy, putrid dumpster rot, bat poop and cow pies. I think it just because layers of my skin were removed. I don't think it's a good idea to do another plan until the scabs on the entire right side of my body have dropped off, or at least reached the crusty healing stage instead of this oozy red open sore thing I've got going on. Yeah, that is pretty gross, Henry admitted. He watched Riley toss Reed a fresh tube of salve and pull some more gauze bandages and tape out of his first aid kit. But the idea I have is psychological warfare. We do everything from a computer terminal in the library. No risk, no danger, no poop, nothing that would keep me from moving out of the garage back to the basement. Maybe even someday all the way back to my bedroom if I stop stinking and itching and oozing and crying in my sleep and periodically flinching like I am these days. Nothing at all like that, Henry said. You've been going through a rough patch, buddy. Way to take one for the team. You're an inspiration, and I have mentioned really tough. Thanks. Reed shrugged modestly and dabbed at the scrape on his right wrist with a cotton ball dipped in hydrogen peroxide from Riley's first aid kit. What wrong needs righting? Riley asked, pulling his small digital voice recorder from his pocket and clicking it on so that he could capture every word, because not only did he like to be prepared for every eventuality, but he also wanted documentation of the way this idea had started, for purposes of comparison and contrast when he wrote his final report. He took out a notebook and a pencil because he didn't trust the recorder as much as his own notes. Henry pulled out of his backpack a flyer that he had ripped off the wall. It read, "Don't run in the halls." "Does that mean the halls on the 3rd floor?" Riley asked. "Or the halls in the school? Or all the halls in all government buildings? Or maybe it's an overall suggestion of every hall in the whole wide world?" "It's not the sign that bothers me," Henry said. "The sign reminds me of what a huge bully Dwight Hauser is. Because he's big and mean and makes everyone in school do what he wants, and his father has a ton of money, and his mother intimidates all the other mothers in the parent volunteer group, and he makes infectious diseases seem preferable by comparison, and we can't stand him?" Riley asked. "And because of the way he fed me bunny turds and told me they were chocolate-covered raisins when we were in kindergarten," Reed asked with a touch of bitterness. "Yes, especially the rabbit droppings. People like him always get away with everything because no one ever stands up to them. The thing with the sign was really annoying because I was standing there this morning reading it, and Hauser went barreling through the crowd like he was an armored tank blasting through a war zone. No reason, just because he could. He thought it was funny to bounce people off the walls, and no one said anything to him, even though the hall was full of teachers." Henry took a deep breath. "Then he was mean to Marcy Robbins." Reed and Riley winced. "He knocked her down when she got in his way, and then he called her stupid and laughed like it was a big joke when she started to cry." "That scum!" Riley put down his pencil. Marcy Robbins was sweet and quiet and so painfully shy that she blushed bright red when teachers called on her and stammered when she had to speak in front of the class, and had probably never done anything wrong to anyone ever once in her entire life. Plus, ever since she had contributed some helpful information while they were planning the dumpster experiment, Riley had been keeping an eye on her. Any girl with the powers of observation she had shown was interesting to him, and he'd noticed how pretty she was, too. "I'm in," Riley said, closing his notebook. "What do you have in mind?" Reed asked. "This afternoon is field day. Since we finished our test and turned in our books this morning, we're supposed to do PE outside all day, but I say we ditch it and hole up in the library. And come up with some flyers of our own." Riley opened his backpack and pulled out a ream of retina-searing fluorescent yellow copy paper. "Aren't you glad now that I'm always prepared for everything?" Henry grinned. "Flyers printed on paper that color will really attract attention." Henry, Riley, and Reed were huddled around a computer terminal in the library, arguing about how to spell imbecile and whether it looked better in print, DWIGHT across the top of the paper or down the left side, followed by the words dishonorable, wormy, insolent, grievous, harassing, and tormentor. Miss Davidson, the librarian, caught sight of them. Sure they were up to no good, and in a hurry to finish cleaning the library by the end of the school day, she called Reed over to her office. She was looking at the rabbit cage. "I need you to carry the bunny to my car, Reed. I'm taking him home for summer vacation." "Oh," she wrinkled her nose. "I guess his cage hasn't been cleaned for a while. Be a dear and remove the soiled newspapers and replace them with a clean, dry lining, will you? There are plastic trash bags behind my desk. Be sure to dispose of the waste properly." "Sure thing," Reed said, more enthusiastically than Miss Davidson would have expected. A few minutes later, after a whispered conference with Riley and Henry, he hurried out of the library with a plastic bag of rabbit turds. Henry stood by the copier, scooping copies off the tray and keeping an eye on Riley, who would just accessed this entire school's email address book and sent a mass mailing. After double-checking the spelling of phrases like barbarous imbecile, menacing tyrant, and brute of them all, as well as providing a hyperlink to his blog, Riley logged off, grabbed a roll of tape from Mrs. Davidson's desk, and met Henry at the door. By the time the next bell rang, 300 flyers had been taped on the hallway walls or slid into faculty mailboxes, and a bag of rabbit byproduct had been smashed into the inner soles of the $350 gym shoes that rested in the backpack of the White Houser. The three boys looked at their handiwork, high-fived, and headed for the principal's office to turn themselves in. They might have been wrong in becoming vigilantes, but they weren't going to try to escape the blame. "Well, men," Henry said, "it's been a pleasure and a privilege to redress an injustice with you. The flyers have flown, the emails have mailed, and we have shown to White for the petty lowlife that he is. That was awesome, Riley, that you had snapped that picture of his hairy butt crack when he bent over in the locker room, and that you cut and pasted it into the email. And Reed, that was a brilliant touch to put the bunny poop in his shoes. Brings the whole thing full circle." "It was," Riley agreed. "Awesome. I'm so glad that someone other than me is going to wind up smelling like crap," Reed said. "I can't wait for summer vacation," Henry said. "We've really been held back with the whole school thing. Imagine 3 months of free time, and just as we're hitting our stride, people will read about us someday. Songs will be sung and movies will be made celebrating our exploits. You watch." Epilogue. "Men, I have a great idea," Henry said to Reed and Riley as they sat in the principal's office waiting for their parents. They'd been suspended with 47 minutes left of the school year, and a wink and a handshake from the principal, who pretended to look stern. "No," Reed said sharply. Henry jumped. Okay, I hear you. "No more ideas," Reed continued, "until I figure out how to explain to my parents that I've been suspended for the last 47 minutes of school because of your last idea." Riley didn't say anything, but he edged away from Henry on the bench. Henry just smiled. Henry's smile was one Reed and Riley had seen many times before, a smile of confidence and of knowledge that somehow, in some way, everything would work out all right. When Reed and Riley saw Henry's smile, they knew. They knew they would do whatever Henry's plan called for. They knew, furthermore, that they would always do whatever Henry's plan called for, because in the end, Henry had the best ideas, and his smile and his belief in his plans was so amazingly convincing. But Reed knew one more thing. No matter what, he would never land in poop again. And Riley knew from the look on Marcy Robin's face when she poked her head into the principal's office and waved to him, clutching one of their flyers, that their exploits was finally going to attract the attention of females. That's the end. Masters of Disasters, written by Gary Paulson. Tomorrow is Pajama Day, so make sure you wear your pajamas for library class tomorrow. Mrs. Buckles and Mrs. Cush and I have always wanted to have Pajama Day in the library. Here's our chance. See you next time.